Have you ever noticed that listening often doesn't require the use of your ears? One definition of listen is to pay attention or to heed. And we all know that actions can speak louder than words. To listen to someone, just watch what they do, and you'll know what matters to them and who and what they prioritize. Take my mom. Carolyn was like any other mother. She told me frequently what not to do. But I learned what to do by paying attention to her actions. When she died over 10 years ago, after a courageous battle with colon cancer, I spoke at her funeral. Although we weren't Catholic, I grew up in New Orleans, where almost everyone is. And in Catholic school, I learned about St. Benedict, specifically his rule of life. A great definition of a rule of life is a holistic description of the rhythms and relationships that create, redeem, sustain, and transform the life God invites you to. Inspired by this, I decided to write Carolyn's Rule of Life in honor of my mom. It's too long for me to read here, but I want to share some of my favorites. Pay attention. One of the greatest rules my mom lived by was don't eat to live, live to eat. You'd be hard-pressed to meet a woman who loved to eat more than Carolyn. Although she never really enjoyed cooking, she lived for the weekends, when we often went out to eat 2 or 3 times. She was a devoted teacher for almost 40 years, but I often wondered if she worked just to pay for the luxury of these meals out. She relished her food and would often make embarrassing noises or faces as she savored every bite. Another one of her rules was to always order last. Why would you duplicate a dish in a group when everyone will be sharing? My Midwestern father was smitten with her on their blind date, even though she reached across the table to taste his food without asking. My mom's ideal table would have been a large, lazy Susan. Everyone could take a couple of bites of their meal and then roll the table around to taste someone else's. She'd always go around asking everyone what they were ordering, so she knew which dishes would be represented. My husband angered her sorely one night by refusing to answer this question. I didn't think he was going to make it. Another of my mom's unspoken rules was to get excited about everything. She would jump up and down in anticipation of an impending holiday or vacation, but just as much about going to the movies or to a favorite restaurant. Are you noticing a theme? If we were at a restaurant or a theater or anywhere really, and it suddenly got more crowded after we'd been there just a little while, she'd knowingly smile and say, "I guess word got out that we were here." She could make anything fun. My mom believed in smiling freely and laughing often, and she did both. My favorite smile was the bright-eyed one she'd get after a couple of drinks. This is a look I can duplicate, but only after I have also had a couple of drinks. When she was like this, she became like a toddler seeing the world for the first time. It was adorable. She also took dance classes her whole life, even as an adult. Although I do think that the mom's dance class was just an excuse to have wine and cheese. If there was music, you could find her dancing, especially with her bright-eyed post-alcohol smile. She would also mispronounce words or phrases all the time. I don't know that this was a rule of life per se, but it sure kept us on our toes. In her endearing way, she'd say, "Did you watch Oprah the other day?" Or she'd order fajitas at her favorite Mexican restaurant. When corrected, we'd get a dismissive hand wave and a chuckle and "You know what I mean." Carolyn respected the dignity of every human being. Whether it was the love and care she showed to the needy students in her inner-city school, or the way she took in my grandmother and cared for her for 12 years while working full-time and raising kids, or how she quickly became best friends in the 80s with a fellow teacher who was homosexual. She was there for him, especially after he was diagnosed with AIDS, and there were few others he could turn to, not even his family. She embodied empathy and compassion. There's so much more to Carolyn's rule of life. The way she and my dad adored each other and would openly show affection anywhere. The way she opened our home to my friends. How she was the glue that held our extended family together. How she had such a way with children. She lived her life with grace, acceptance, and peace, and that's the same way she left it. Being with her when she passed was truly one of the most grace-filled moments of my life. One lesson she did not need to speak out loud was to get your colonoscopy. If she had listened to that at age 50, instead of waiting until she was 61, she would likely still be here with us. I have already had a couple myself, and I do my best to remind everyone, don't put it off. Listen to my mother. If you're over 50, go get yours. These days, I'm trying to listen to her still, by talking about her frequently with my sons, by remembering the ways she lived her life, by working on my post-cocktail smile, by eating good food and perfecting my, "oh my God, that is so good" expression, by striving to be kind and empathetic, especially in this election season, by laughing as much as possible. And yes, there are actual words my mother spoke I should have heeded. I am a 46-year-old woman with braces for the first time because I argued vehemently against, you really should get braces. I definitely should have listened to my mother.